All right, so we have been looking at this amazing series of things, starting with the ignorance and to kind of find the root cause of that ignorance or that delusion and kind of moving backwards. And we had a look at three qualities just now. We had sense restraint or lack of sense restraint, lack of mindfulness and situational awareness, and then we had like unwise attention was the last one. And all of these three are very closely connected with each other. You could say that a lack of sense restraint actually is because of unwise attention. You can say a lack of mindfulness and situational awareness is also because of unwise attention. So all of these things kind of altogether can be understood as ayoniso manasikara, as unwise attention in one way or another. You're not looking at the world, looking at other people, looking at your mind, looking at everything in quite the right way, and then that leads to defilements and problems and all kinds of things because of that. So it can be summarized as that. So you can say that unwise attention leads to the three kinds of misconduct. That's one way, a simple way of thinking about it. And then those bad ways or bad misconduct leads to the five hindrances, and that fuels ignorance or delusion at the very last stage. So why then do we have unwise attention? That's interesting. Why do we attend unwisely to the world? Because we are deluded. So it goes back to the beginning, back to the end again, because the ending is ignorance. So then they go in a circle. That's a bit unfortunate. We don't want to go in circles. We don't get anywhere. We want to have an escape route. So there must be some other reason why we have unwise attention. It is not enough to say because of ignorance or delusion, because then we just go round and round. And we have to break the circle somehow. And this is one of those kind of interesting things about the Dhamma, how the Buddha explains, delusion. Delusion leads to more delusion, and that's why delusion is very difficult to get out of, because once you are deluded, it tends to beget more delusion. Delusion drives delusion. And you find an interesting suttas called on the vipalasas. The vipalasas are the distortions of the mind. And so you have distortion of perception, you have distortion of mind, you have distortion of view. And these distortions, they're kind of always there. And the only way to get out of them, you have to break them somehow. So where do you break them? Well, basically you break them at the point of view. And that point of view is, well, where does that come from, that right view? Comes from the Buddha. That's why the Buddha is so important. Without the Buddha, we don't have a chance to break that cycle of delusion going round and round. You need something like a circuit breaker that says stop. And that circuit breaker is the teaching of the Buddha. And that's why the arising of the Buddha in the world is such an important thing, why it really matters, because it gives you that circuit breaker where finally you can find a way out of this self-perpetuating delusion, where delusion drives delusion, and you can kind of come out of that. That is kind of the idea here. And so that's why, so when we talk here about the cause for unwise attention, we should expect something like that, something like, well, not hearing the good Dhamma or some. That's what we should expect, because as long as we have no connection with the Buddha or the Dhamma, it will just keep on going. So this gives an idea of what the next factor is going to be here. I say that irrational application of the mind or unwise attention is fueled by something. It is not unfueled. And what is the fuel for the unwise attention of the mind? Well, it is delusion, but here we're going to see something else. So here we come to this idea that the Buddha leads to the way out. You should say lack of faith. Lack of faith is the reason why we have the unwise attention. And this is really interesting, because when we talk about the idea of wisdom, very often we think of wisdom as something personal. I am wise. I have wisdom. Yes, it's a quality that you have. The 5 faculties, the panch indriya, they are about qualities you develop on this path. And these are faculties, and one of those faculties is wisdom. It's a personal quality that we have. So if it is a personal quality, how can it be based on faith? Isn't that strange? How can wisdom be based on faith? Isn't that the whole point, that wisdom is not faith? That faith is kind of, oh yes, I believe, you believe regardless, whereas wisdom is knowing. Isn't that the whole point? And this is kind of where it is interesting, because the point here is that faith that you have here is the faith in the Dhamma. And that Dhamma implies wisdom. So there is wisdom. But initially you don't have any wisdom. That's the whole point. You are deluded. You don't understand the reality. And so because you haven't got that wisdom, you need to get the wisdom from outside. So that outside is the Buddha. And that then allows you to have wise attention, because the Buddha says, attend like this, don't attend like that. So you attend in accordance with how the Buddha says we should attend. And so you're wise, you apply the mind wisely, not because you have wisdom, but because the Buddha has wisdom. You just follow along. You just say, yes sir, and you just do what the Buddha says. That's okay. It doesn't really matter so much where the wisdom comes from. But it's a different way of thinking about the idea of wisdom. Sometimes we just borrow it from someone else. But that doesn't mean you have no wisdom, because you also have to recognize that the Buddha is teaching something useful. That is your wisdom. You recognize the Dhamma, you recognize that the Buddha is somehow special. That is your wisdom. And then because you listen to the Buddha, you apply the mind in a new way. And then you become wise because you listen to the Buddha. Then as you develop your mind, after a while that wisdom becomes yours. So it starts with faith, and that faith grows, you learn. That faith is slowly transmuted or transformed into wisdom as you go along the path. And so in Buddhism, faith and wisdom go together. They're not really separate things. In very often when we talk about faith, this is one of the reasons I don't like the word faith so much. Sometimes I prefer confidence for the word saddha, because faith kind of gives the idea that you have no idea, just follow blindly. But that's not really the way it is in Buddhism. Faith and wisdom are 2 sides of the same coin. And when you become a stream enter, which is when you see the Dhamma, you see what the Buddha taught, you get an insight into the same principles the Buddha was teaching, that is when your faith becomes perfect. So when you have wisdom, you also have perfect faith. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? So faith and wisdom go together on the Buddhist path. They're not separate things. And that's why faith is maybe the wrong word. Confidence might be better. You have perfect confidence in the Buddha because you know for yourself. You don't need to ask the Buddha anymore. You know exactly what he was talking about. So you read the suttas. The Buddha says, okay, don't be angry. Look at people in this way. Don't look at people in that way. And then you follow along, and that's how you are applying your mind wisely. You have wise attention because you're following what the Buddha says. The Buddha says, watch the breath, and you says yes, and you've watched the breath, and then hopefully you have some results. Or the Buddha says, be kind, and then hopefully that works for you, etc., etc. So where does the lack of faith come from? I say that lack of faith is fueled by something. It is not unfueled. And what is the fuel for lack of faith? You should say listening to an untrue teaching. Asadhamma savanang. So if you listen to some teaching that is not true, that leads you in the wrong direction, then you... Lack of faith here means lack of faith in the Dhamma. That's what it means. So an untrue teaching, maybe you gain faith in that, or maybe you don't get faith in anything, or whatever. So you don't have anything to hold on to. There's no Dhamma for you to kind of grasp onto. Untrue teaching, saddhamma, the true Dhamma, the reality, the nature of things. Listening to the nature of things rather than the non-nature of things. And then what is the cause of that? I said that listening to an untrue teaching is fueled by something. It is not fueled. And what is the fuel for listening to an untrue teaching here? What do you reckon? Oh, I shouldn't kind of reveal the secrets. The answer is associating with untrue persons. Asapurisa sangseva. Sangseva means to associate with. Asapurisa is the non-true person. It means literally means the non-Aryans, those people who have not seen the reality of things. Yeah, you don't hang out enough with the Buddha. You should hang out more with the Buddha. Make the Buddha your friend. Yeah, yay, the Buddha. Hooray, the Buddha is my teacher. Yay. That's kind of the way to think about this. How do you hang out with the Buddha? Read the suttas. That's where the Buddha is found. The one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. The one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. So if you can read the suttas and you can gain access to those, you're hanging out with the Buddha. Or you can hang out with other true persons, other Aryas. Who are they? You don't know who they are. This is kind of the thing. This is why it's so useful to hang out with the Buddha, because we don't really know. I mean, we can make educated guesses, and sometimes you're going to get it right, sometimes you're not. It's very hard to know sometimes, and so that's why it is so incredibly important to have some relationship to the suttas and to the Buddha, because that gives you that grounding, which otherwise is very difficult to get. Yeah, you don't really know otherwise. So this is kind of the point. So associating with untrue persons, yeah, that's kind of where everything goes wrong from the very beginning. So it is about who we hang out with, who are our kalyana mittas. Do we have the Buddha as our friend, or do we have Devadatta or Mara as our friend? Mara Mitta. That's it. If you have a dodgy monk, we give him, or a dodgy nun, we give them the name Mara Mitta. Mara friend. I promise not to. Maybe no. I'm not going to stop thinking wrong thoughts. Mara Mitta. That's an interesting name. Never heard that one before. Okay. It sounds quite nice, doesn't it? This is why it's Mara, because Mara always sounds nice. Yeah, Mara tempts you in. This is nice. You will like this. So then you become. Mara's only male, is it? Yeah. 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 Okay. Oh, what was that? Is it unfair? Is it? Yeah. Okay. Whatever it is, it's bad news. So we can agree on that. Okay. So that is the. So this is. It's kind of very fascinating because it shows us something very profound. Yeah, the power of hearing the real teaching, of associating with the right people, is incredibly important. The whole path of liberation starts with that. That's where it begins. And liberation is basically impossible without this. It kind of is rooted in this idea of associating with real people. And of course, this is very closely related to the fact that right view is at the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path, because right view is what you get by associating with the right people. You get wrong view by associating with the wrong kind of people. So it fits perfectly with the idea of the Noble Eightfold Path, the same kind of idea. But before we do that, let's now have a look at this in the reverse order. Oh, I'm not sure what's coming next here. Yeah. So the Buddha recapitulates what he has just said. In this way, when the factor of associating with untrue persons is fulfilled, it fulfills the factor of listening to untrue teachings. When the factor of listening to untrue teachings is fulfilled, it fulfills the factor of lack of faith, which then fulfills the factor of irrational or application of the mind or unwise attention, which then fulfills the lack of mindfulness and situational awareness, which then fulfills the lack of sense restraint, which then fulfills the 3 kinds of misconduct, which then fulfills the 5 hindrances, which then fulfills ignorance, fulfills delusion, fulfills whatever you want to call that word, avidya. When ignorance is fulfilled, it fulfills craving for continued existence. That's the fuel for craving for continued existence, and that is how it is fulfilled. So, if you want to maximize your ignorance, then you go to the wrong teachers. Yeah, don't go to the non-Buddha, go to the anti-Buddha, go to the whatever it is. So this is kind of how that happens. And again, very, very powerful, because it says something about the effect and the influence that people have on us, especially those who are the leaders on the spiritual path and these kind of things. So what comes next? So this comes a beautiful simile to explain this. It's like when the heavens rain heavily on a mountaintop, and the water flows down to fill the hollows, crevices and creeks. As they become full, they fill up the pools. The pools fill up the lake fill up the streams, and the streams fill up the rivers. And as the rivers become full, they fill up the ocean. That's the fuel for the ocean, and that's how it is filled up. The ocean of ignorance. Sounds bad, doesn't it? And all you have to do is you have to kind of hang out with the wrong people. That's the rain on that mountaintop. It rains and rains and rains. And as it rains because you hang out with all the wrong people, the ocean of ignorance, the ocean of continued craving for continued existence fills up as a consequence. So now let us move on to the opposite side. So it just repeats it one more time. Wow, so much repetition. Let's drop that repetition. It's too much. Maybe it's nice in an oral setting, but not now. Okay, so now we're going to look at the reverse side. So we have just seen how the ignorance or delusion is filled up. Now we're going to look at knowledge and freedom. Vidya vimutti. So vidya is the opposite of avidya, and vidya does not just mean knowledge, it means insight, it means wisdom. Yeah, vidya is related to the English word wisdom, actually. So it means wisdom and freedom. Two very beautiful qualities coming together. The wisdom is what allows you to understand the world, allows you to be wise, allows you to know how to deal with other people, knows how to deal with any problem in life, how to overcome dukkha. Wisdom is what gives you access to the meaning of life. All of these things are contained in wisdom or knowledge, vidya. Yeah, you have understood the meaning of life. It's kind of extraordinary. It's possible even to understand the meaning of life. But that is really what the Buddha is saying here. So this is what you gain by practicing this path. You gain the highest understanding that anyone can possibly get. Yeah, and of course, beyond understanding the meaning of life, there is nothing else that is worthwhile knowing. This is what matters. And of course, what is so beautiful about understanding the meaning of life and having the knowledge into what the human being essentially is, what makes you happy and what makes you suffer, that knowledge always comes with a good result. That good result is freedom. That good result is happiness. Because when you understand, you can make good decisions. You know how you should live, you know what you should do. And so freedom and knowledge, or freedom and understanding, or freedom and wisdom must always go together. They cannot really be separated from each other. Freedom and then happiness and wisdom also must always go together. Because it means you understand the path, you understand the way, you understand what you have to do. So these are these two beautiful qualities at the end of the Buddhist path. Understanding or wisdom and freedom. Vidya vimutti. Okay. So then the Buddha talks about this. And what he says is, I say that wisdom and freedom are fueled by something. They are not unfueled. And what is the fuel for wisdom and freedom? You should say the 7 factors of awakening, the 7 awakening factors. It kind of makes sense because the 7 awakening factors, they are the factors that lead to awakening. That's why they're called awakening factors. So that sort of makes sense. So what are the 7 awakening factors all about? And they are all about samadhi. They begins with mindfulness, they end with the most profound samadhi. Yes, they are about developing samadhi ultimately. So it starts with the sati sambojjhanga, which is the mindfulness factor of awakening. It ends with the upekkha sambojjhanga, which is the equanimity awakening factor. And then the 6th one is samadhi. So it is dealing, towards the end, it is dealing with samadhi. So when you develop the 7 awakening factors fully, you are developing samadhi. Samadhi is what leads to vijja and vimutti. What is that samadhi? 4 jhanas. Yeah, upekkha is the 4th jhana. So it's the 4 jhanas are what leads to the vijja and vimutti. So this is something that you see again in the suttas everywhere, that the 4 jhanas and samadhi are the cause for seeing things according to reality. We just saw that before in the previous sutta. Samadhi is the cause for yathabhuta jnanadasana, and here we see that the 7 factors of awakening are the cause for awakening. So samadhi is the cause. So what about sati? What happens to sati? Well, sati is the cause for samadhi. Yeah, so sati comes first, mindfulness comes first, then comes samadhi, then comes awakening. That is the sequence. Noble Eightfold Path, 7th factor is sati, satipatthana. The 8th factor is samadhi, and then the result of that is awakening. This is the path to awakening, and this is what you see everywhere in the suttas. So sati does lead to awakening, but via samadhi. Always via samadhi. Sati, samadhi, then awakening. Very important kind of understanding in the suttas. So you need that power of the mind, the clarity of the mind, the joy of the mind, that it comes from samadhi to enable you to break through these things. And part of this is the fact that the hindrances are really dispelled for a long time. If you get to samadhi, the hindrances are out of action. For hours on time, maybe days of time, if the samadhi is very profound. And that is where you can achieve that. This is mentioned specifically in the Nalakapana Sutta. Mentioned this, the idea that the hindrances are dispelled for a long time, and that's why it becomes possible to see things according to reality here. So, okay. So that is the 7 awakening factors. They are the cause for vijja vimutti. So what is the cause for awakening factors? Sati, are you sure? Maybe true. Maybe. Yeah. So this is what I just said 2 seconds ago, right? The satipatthana leads to samadhi. So we should expect here also that maybe sati. Yeah. So maybe the venerable over here is right. Maybe sati is the next one, because that would kind of fit with the overall pattern. And lo and behold, let's have a look here. There's nothing really surprising here. I said that the 7 awakening factors are fueled by something. They are not unfueled. And what is the fuel for the 7 awakening factors? You should say the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, the 4 satipatthanas. So the Dhamma is consistent, which is kind of nice. So 4 satipatthana meditations is what leads to the 7 factors of awakening. And again, this is something you see throughout the suttas. It's a standard kind of way the suttas are presented. So what does it mean, the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditations? 4 satipatthanas. How do we practice the 4 satipatthanas? It's kind of interesting. It's when you read the Taṇhāsutta, and you may think, not sure how it is to be practiced. It says you watch the feelings, you watch the mind states. How exactly do you do it? Do you just sit down and watch the mind? That seems a bit, maybe that's not going to work. And the answer in the suttas, how to do the satipatthana practice, the Buddha says in the Anapanasati Sutta, you just watch the breath. Yeah, it's the breath meditation. This is kind of the way whereby all the four satipatthanas are fulfilled, simply by watching the breath. So it is not really explained quite in the Satipatthana Sutta what you are supposed to do or the context for doing it. It just says that you know the feelings, you know the mind states, and you know dhammas. It doesn't say exactly how you know those things, but the Anapanasati Sutta gives you that kind of background. It tells you the context. The context is the breath, watching the breath. And this is one of the reasons why the Anapanasati Sutta is so interesting here. And you read it and you align it with the Satipatthana Sutta, and it all kind of becomes very sensible once you see it in that way. There's a little bit more to Satipatthana than the Anapanasati Sutta, but the main Satipatthana can be fulfilled simply by watching the breath. It's kind of nice, and it makes it very simple. You understand how the meditation works. But it is also, you can now see why the meditation on the breath is not always so easy. Yeah, because it is the Satipatthana is supposed to then lead from Satipatthana to the awakening factors, and then Vijjavimutti, liberation after that, is very close to liberation. So that's why it is not easy, because if it was easy, you would all be arahants already. Yeah. But it takes time, and this is why this is kind of, even just watching the breath is not a simple thing, and then developing that breath meditation to go through all of these steps we have been looking at, the piti, the passaddhi, whatever. And so sometimes we are too impatient. We think that we should be able to get these things, but actually these things are not simple matters. And so please don't be disappointed. And people often say, "Oh, when will I get the jhanas? Ajahn Brahm, please, when will I get the jhanas? I've been trying so hard to get the jhanas." Trying so hard, maybe that's precisely the problem. You haven't been just chillaxing enough. That's kind of the reason why you haven't got the jhanas. This is kind of how it works. So 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. You watch the breath. Through the breath arises the bojjhangas. As you're watching the breath, those 7 bojjhangas arise. The piti, the passaddhi, the samadhi, the upekkha, they all come through that process of watching the breath. It fuels that one. Take it all the way to the end. Then you have vijjavimutti. This is how it works. It's not super duper complicated or anything. It's just a matter of putting in the foundations, really. That's kind of what it comes down to. Anyway, I say the 4 kinds of mindful... I'm losing my mindfulness. Let's have a break. 5-minute break, then we get back to things.
So Ajahn, on translation, you have mindfulness and the one earlier, mindfulness and situational awareness, and I've seen you translate it to sampajanya, to clear comprehension or clear awareness. It seems to be clear comprehension, and situational awareness seems a bit far. The words, just on the words, and also satipatthana. I've also seen your translation as 4 applications of mindfulness. It's another way of. Here we have 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. So
right.
You're just seeking your views on the words, the choice of words used in those translations.
Yeah. Okay. So starting with the starting with sampajanya. So the idea with situational awareness is that the way that it is described in the sutras is that you have sampajanya in the various situations in your life. You go into the village, you go back, you're eating, you are speaking, and in each one of those you have awareness of what you're doing, whether it's suitable, whether it is suitability, especially if it is suitable, actually. What is the first one again? First sampajanya, sampajanya of appropriateness, something appropriateness, suitability, not appropriateness of, anyway, the fact that you're doing is suitable, that kind of covers it kind of nicely. Yeah. And so that is a kind of situational awareness. So it's a nice word that kind of covers it reasonably well. But then sampajanya is also used, for example, within Satipatthana itself, when it comes to, it is the main refrain of Satipatthana is Sati Sampajano, Atapi Vinaya Loke Abhijado Manassa is kind of the standard refrain in Satipatthana. So when you are watching the breath, you're also supposed to have Sampajanya. And their situational awareness basically just means that you are aware of what you are doing, what you're supposed to be doing. Are you watching the breath, or are you thinking about lunch, or whatever it might be. Yeah, so your mind, is it in the right place or in the wrong place? And so in that case, full awareness kind of makes more sense, in my opinion, because it's not so much a situation. Okay, you are meditating, that is a situation, you could argue, but it's more, are they having full awareness of what is going on? And in fact, the word clear comprehension is not bad, because awareness just means you are aware, but that doesn't tell you whether you're doing the right or wrong thing. You can be aware of lying, you can be aware of stealing, awareness of stealing, taking, running away. Okay, you may have full awareness, but it's obviously something is lacking there. Yeah, and what is lacking is that comprehension part. Are you doing the right thing or not? And so that's kind of the idea of clear comprehension, is that you have clarity about whether you're doing the right thing or not. You're supposed to watch the breath. Okay, what am I doing? Am I really there? Am I somewhere else? So you can see from this point of view that all of these translations have are right from a certain perspective. So it just depends on how it is used in the suttas. And then you have even in the jhanas, you use the word sampajano actually, in the third jhana, sati sampajano. And their full awareness is almost perfect translation, because then you're not really comprehending anything in the third jhana, because you are stuck in the jhana, nor is it awareness of the situation. It's just pure, full brightness. The floodlights are on in your light. You know exactly what's happening. Maximum mindfulness. So full awareness there is quite a nice translation. Mindfulness and full awareness. So contextually, it means different things, and that's again what makes these things difficult to pin down. As for sati or satipatthana, so here we have the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. And is it 4 different kinds? I would say that is kind of slightly misleading. I would say it's 4 stages of mindfulness meditation might be better, because they build on each other. Very often you cannot choose. You start off with the body and then the mind moves on to the feelings. This is what we saw in the Anapanasati Sutta. You start off by watching the breath, then the feelings arise. Yeah, the piti come from that. Actually, we haven't been looking at the Satipatthana Sutta, but the Anapanasati Sutta, I'm getting very confused now. But they go from one thing to the next one. Yeah, and then when the feelings become very refined, then it moves on to the mind. Yeah, so it moves on in stages. So I would say more the 4 stages of mindfulness meditation is maybe better. And that is why the 4 applications of mindfulness works, to my mind, because you're applying mindfulness in these 4 stages, one after the other. Not so much 4 different kinds, as 4 applications happening stage-wise. The idea with application is that you have already established mindfulness. So when you come to the Satipatthana, mindfulness is already there. Mindfulness is established through your conduct. That is the whole point of conduct. We have seen already now, the next thing here after this is going to be very interesting, because it answers basically this very point. What is the fuel for the mindfulness meditation? And it is the 3 kinds of good conduct. Yeah, so you speak well, you act well, you think well, all of these kind of things. And so because of that, the mindfulness is established through that good conduct, and then you apply the mindfulness that is established. Yeah, so first you establish mindfulness, then you apply it. And this is why when you read the formula for the Satipatthana Sutta, it always says Sattima. Sattima Satto Sampajano. Satima means having mindfulness. It's already there when you start. That's why in the Anapanasati Sutta it says, having established mindfulness, satting parimukkhang upatapetva, having established mindfulness, then you watch the breath. So it is always mindfulness first, then you apply it. And so that is why I don't fully like the translation, the four establishings of mindfulness, because it sounds like you are establishing mindfulness through the process of meditation, when actually you establish it first, and then you use that mindfulness in the meditation. So the four applications of mindfulness. Ajahn Brahm sometimes called it the four focuses of mindfulness, which I think is also okay, very similar to the four applications of mindfulness. Four foundations of mindfulness, it's a wrong translation, because that gives the idea that you are using satipatthana to give rise to mindfulness. It is the foundation for mindfulness. But that is not what it is. It's the using of mindfulness. So, what do you think, Niwan? Are you satisfied with that answer? Yeah, good enough. Yeah, okay, okay, good.
Ajahn, I'm thinking of this sati sampajanya versus sankhara. Sati sampajanya is we are physically very much aware of whatever we are doing, whereas sankhara is mental formation. But it's often that mental formation sankhara suddenly is spring up, and then we lose sati sampajanya. Suddenly it's somewhere. Something is physical, something is mental.
Yeah.
So sankhara, when it happens, is like suddenly it creates a karma without our being aware of it. So how do we balance between the what do you call that, attention on the sankhara before it forms, by paying attention to sampajanya? Right.
So how you do that is just by being more mindful. That's what you and how are you more mindful? Well, this is kind of what we're looking at next year, how to be more mindful. So it's just about being more mindful. That's really all it is. The more mindfulness you have, the earlier you will catch that sankhara arising. Sankhara in the sutras usually just means the will, actually. It doesn't mean all the mental formations. This is why I don't like the translation mental formation. I think that misses the point very often. Sankhara, as it is used in the sutras as the fourth khandha, sankhara khandha, or as the second factor of dependent origination, sankhara paccaya vijnana, avijja paccaya sankhara. In both of those contexts, it means the will, the volition. So it is the driving force behind the thinking and behind all the things that arise in the mind. And so if you are aware of what's going on in your mind, you can kind of see it happening. You can see now my mind is leaning towards thinking something it shouldn't be thinking. And the more mindfulness you have, the more quickly you will catch that. So it's really about maximizing the mindfulness. So you sit back, you watch. And very often you don't have to do very much. One of the ways, the beautiful Vitakka Santana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 20, calming of thoughts, one of the ways of calming the thoughts is the ayoniso amanasikara, not paying attention. That's one of them. Another one is to allow it to calm down. You probably know this simile. You sound like you know the sutras quite well, so you probably know the simile already. The idea that the man says, "Oh, I'm walking. Why not I just stand? I'm standing. Oh, maybe I should sit down. Okay, maybe I should lie down." And the idea there is the calming, the sankhara sammata, the vitakka sankhara sammata, the calming of the sankhara that give rise to the thought. How do you do that? Well, basically just by watching and observing, by being with it. And if you watch, it calms down by itself. So in your meditation, if something happens, don't have to do very much. You just wait, you just observe. And as you are observing, because mindfulness has that power, it actually calms it down by itself. If you feel that suddenly some desire arising in your mind, but then instead of just saying, no, don't, no desire, it's the wrong time, which kind of is often using force. Instead, you just observe, okay, desire arising, and you kind of observe it. And if that observation is very strong, the desire will just disappear very quickly. You just go stay with the breath or whatever, the desire just remains in the background. So very often you don't have to do very much. It's not so much about catching it as just observing it. and that kind of disappears.
Sankhara often happens when you are not in meditative state.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah. So again, this is why, we have to have mindfulness also in daily life. It's not the same kind of mindfulness, it's a weaker kind of mindfulness. You can't, when you meditate, mindfulness can be quite strong, but usually the idea is to have enough mindfulness to catch yourself in time. Yeah, so you can even see, okay, I'm getting a bit upset now. Okay, let me move in a different direction. I'm about to say something silly. Let me hold back before it comes out of my mouth, Come out already. Sometimes comes out already, but at least you don't say anything more. At least you stop there, yeah? So that's kind of already good already, yeah.
Sorry, Ajahn, just now you mentioned the 4 stages of mindfulness meditation. So it's like the first one is the body, feeling, mind, and what's the last one?
Dhamma.
And what is that?
Yeah, that's interesting. What is that? The different translations. Some people say mental objects. Is that correct? Maybe, maybe not. Taṇhāsutta has a translation principles, observing principles, which is an interesting one. And that translation kind of comes out of a very kind of deep study of the Taṇhāsutta, and it's a very interesting translation because all of these things are mental objects. Yeah, we talked about the mind before. Well, if you're observing the mind, you're observing mental objects. Feelings are mental objects, and the thing which makes the last one special, which makes it kind of unique among the Satipatthanas, is that it focuses on the causality of things. So it focuses on the 5 hindrances and the 7 awakening factors. Those are the 2 main aspects of Dhammanupassana. And those 2 things, they focus on what the thing is, how it arises, how it doesn't arise, how we stop it from arising, and then how it doesn't arise in the future. These are the 4 aspects, and they're all about the causality. The first one is just knowing it, but the other ones are about causality. Yeah? Why does it arise? How to not make it arise? How to stop it arising in the future? And that causality is like a principle. It's a principle of Dhamma. Everything in Buddhism happens because of causes. And the same thing with the 7 Bhujangas. It's about how these things arise. And when you understand how they arise, then of course you can do something about them. You can stop them, or you can make them arise. And what is very important here is that, usually when you go to the Dhammanupassana, they talk about the 6 sense bases, the 5 aggregates, the 4 noble truths. But the 2 fundamental parts there are the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening. They are by far the most 2 important ones. All the other ones are secondary. They may not be original. They may have been added at some point in history. The early ones are 5 hindrances, 7 bhujangas, and they are all to do with causality. And that's why the contemplation of principles, you could even say the contemplation of causality, if you wanted to, that is kind of what that gets to the point of what that is about.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please, Venerable. Yeah.
No, one day, Ajahn Brahm, after his talk, somebody asked about mindfulness and awareness. They asked if it's the same. He said, no, completely different. What do you say?
Mindfulness and awareness are different.
Yes, he said completely different.
Really?
But then he didn't explain further.
He didn't explain further? Okay, that was...
So maybe you could.
Maybe I can. So you have to read Ajahn Brahma's mind to know what he's talking.
Well, don't you think it's the same or very close?
It depends. These are just words. It depends what you mean by these words. That's the problem. People use words differently. So it depends what you mean by them. So I don't really know what Ajahn Brahm means by it when he uses those words.
Well, just that, mindfulness and awareness.
Yeah,
just but those 2 words. Don't you think it's the same?
Awareness, but mindfulness is almost like a artificial word. That was chosen by Thomas Rhys Davies back in the 1880s to be a translation for sati. before that time, it just usually meant memory. That's what it meant originally, that word. So mindfulness has a very strong memory component. And in that sense, it is very similar to sati in Pali, because sati also has a strong memory component to it. So mindfulness has this double meaning. It has the memory component, and then it has the awareness component. Yeah. So if you're talking about the awareness component, it has almost exactly the same meaning as awareness. But if you're talking about the memory component, I would say it's different. So it depends how you're using the word.
Yeah. Oh, that's all he said. That's why I thought,
You have to ask him. You have to write him an email. Ask him why. What does it mean?
Happy afternoon, Ajahn.
Happy afternoon. That's very nice of you. Yeah, very good.
I was thinking, what is the most skillful way before we can catch ourselves mindfully before we doze off in front of you after heavy lunch?
Before you doze off?
After heavy lunch.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is somebody start to walk the back in front, but cannot, but it's in the table form. So what is the best method?
The best method, not just to stop, but it's to be interested in the Dhamma. You have to be really interested.
Sometimes we doze off after lunch.
Yeah, even if you're interested. But I may be not interested enough. Maybe you need to be more interested. Yeah. So then it becomes more powerful. I don't know. It's tricky. If you feel really tired, you're allowed to snore in here. So snoring is okay. But it is true. Yeah, straight after lunch, not so easy. But then again, Bobby said maybe it's better to do Dhamma because all those people don't know what to do straight after lunch. Yeah, they kind of wander around or they fall asleep or something. Yeah. So we carry on straight after lunch. That's the idea. Is that true, Bobby? Is that so something like that? Yeah. So, but if you think it is not, I think everyone is open to changes in the schedule. So if you want to do things differently, you are allowed to make suggestions. But please don't give Bobby too hard a time because it's tough to be the organizer. Yeah, and then yeah.